Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Following the President's directive to the Central Bank of Nigeria to blacklist from the foreign exchange market and the banking industry all companies, their owners, and top management caught smuggling a list of 43 banned items, the CBN Governor on Friday announced the Apex Bank's commitment to ensure compliance. He also added that a total of 10 products, including rice, maize, cassava, tomatoes, cotton, palm oil, poultry, fish, livestock, dairy, and cocoa, will be given top priority by the CBN in its interventions to boost local production. Joining us now to speak on these and other economic issues is macroeconomic policy analyst, Professor Ken Ife. Professor Ken Ife, good morning. Welcome to the morning show.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, we should be thanking you. Thank you very much for your kindness. Yeah. But ask you, this new...
Always my pleasure.
Thank you. This new revelation by the CBN Governor, what do you think of it? What do you make of it? What, in fact, do you think of the decision to, ban some items from being imported? Because there are some people who say, look, you don't need to ban anything. That it doesn't make good economic sense. Leave the market open and then adopt policies, that can encourage ease of doing business, creativity, productivity within the economy.
I hear your argument, but I haven't seen any word ban in all of this. But let me begin by saying that the presidential directive is justified and justifiable. The actions being taken by CBN are properly within their mandate, secondary mandate, and also within the ambit of the law. And with due regards to our commitments to ECOWAS and our commitments to WTO. Let me look at the macroeconomic back context of this. You realize that in 2015-2016, Nigeria experienced 60% drop in our forex revenue from oil. And so the CBN saw its receipts go down from $3.2 billion to $1 billion against a request for forex of $4.66 billion a month. Now, they tried everything they could on the supply side by invoking macro-prudential measures, capital account controls, and they couldn't solve the problem. So they had to switch to demand management and had to list 41 items, and he didn't ban them. He restricted access to forex from those. So, and WTO doesn't say CBN should fund import. It doesn't say that. So you could still have your day. But the second directive that now says you have to comply or punish is actually targeting smuggling and dumping. Dumping of substandard goods in our country is injurious to our health, and it contravenes even the WTO rules. Now, smuggling goods evades tax, and we don't know what else is being smuggled. So in both counts, CBN is justified to take extra action. Whatever action that is asked to take is within the law. Now, the key questions is what are the ultimate purpose of this? The ultimate purpose is to grow more food in the country, not only for food security and nutrition, but also to have enough feedstock for value addition and productive capacity. Secondly, to create a lot of employment. Thirdly, to enable Nigerians to eat what they produce. Go and look at the 61 items and see what are in there. These are things that we can produce in our country. We're not growing our economy if we're not doing this. Now, the challenge is, why are people not complying? Why? The question is why? And what else needs to be done? People are just targeting CBN for no good reason. There are other things that could be done. The Minister for Trade could go to WTO and say, we're invoking safeguard measures because these things I have mentioned, smuggling, dumping, and what have you, are injurious to our trade and are affecting our hemorrhaging our airport. He can go there. And then we are entitled to do that. And we are doing all that is necessary to push for this. CBN has done more than 5 consultations on the value chains. That is a major requirement of WTO. And that is consult the entire value chain, do this for a period of time, and then make sure that there is public interest justification. So all these 3 conditions are met. CET, ECOWAS, We cannot raise that because we are committed to these tariffs. But we're allowed to use levy instruments to beef up the duties, effective duty on those items. That's what the Minister of Finance should be doing, to complement the action so that the CBN is not left alone. You know, CBN is helping, but it shouldn't be left alone and targeted.
Professor Ife, I'm very glad that you mentioned some very great points there. You mentioned the dumping of substandard goods, and I think we can start there on that point, because it is alleged that a lot of the main large companies that are producing these goods, as they're exporting the goods, they're actually importing lower grades allegedly from other African countries to fulfill local demand. So if we're going to be putting a restriction on these 43 items, don't we also have to put a restriction on exportations as well? Otherwise, there would kind of be a deficit, or how do we take that?
No, the thing is, what the bank has done has never been done before. You have an orchestration, two orchestrations. You have directive on items to support. You have directive on compliance. You also have Presidential Order 3, which is on the demand side, saying, look, trade local, buy local, and that is giving a signal to all the government agencies to buy and patronize made in Nigerian goods. So you can see the balance in the policy directives. Then secondly, what the bank has actually done is to attack the the value chain on end to end. That is from land clearing, land development, seed, input, all the way through production to processing and access to market. We've never had it this way. All we have had in the past was patches of intervention here and there at different segments of the value chain, and they collapse because you meet. It's a very long chain, agriculture. So he's done that. He's done that successfully with the Anchor Borrowers Program. He's doing that now with all these items. I attended the event on Friday, and I couldn't believe it. I thought it was a hurricane, but it was actually a tsunami that I saw on Friday. You know, orchestrated action both on the supply and demand side to ensure that this does not fail. And it will not fail. I can assure you that it will not fail.
Well, I like your optimism, Professor Ife, but one major observation has been that the CBN, whose principal duty is to monitor, and focus on monetary policy, has also been very active on the fiscal policy side. And one of the major problems we've had in the last 4 years is a misalignment on, between monetary policy and fiscal policy. How do we address that going forward? What would be your advice to the government, the federal government?
Okay, by the way, I agree that the primary mandate of the bank, the CBN, is to maintain financial system stability. But it has a secondary mandate, which is to promote sustainable economic development. There is nothing sustainable about smuggling goods in your country, bringing in substandard goods. They are injurious and are criminal in that respect. Now, the other fiscal policy, I gave you examples of how fiscal policy could support the monetary policy. Because when the bank justifiably has limited access to forex to 41 items, and we have identified that, I expect the Minister for Trade to be running up and down, going to WTO to issue notices on safeguard measures, and also issue notice of a negotiation. Identify those countries, China, Malaysia, who are dumping, and then begin negotiation. This is exactly what the American president has done to China. But the thing is that there is a monumental opportunity that we are missing. With the trade war between America and China and the tariff jumping to 25% from 10%, Nigeria is a powerful conduit for China to export to America under AGOA as 0% tariff. So which means that we should have a big showcase going to America saying, as far as we are concerned, we are at war with you on the area of smuggling and this and that, but we want to do business with you. We have 34 export processing zones. Come in here and then come and produce with us and then get the whole thing back into America. And we'll guarantee you 40% of what you produce into our own market. So it's not that we don't want to do the business. And I haven't heard the word ban. I don't think I have heard that. All I've heard is restriction and punitive measures against smuggling and all of these trade malpractices.
Thank you very much for that, sir.
And so, in terms of fiscal,
Sorry, sir,
yes,
you can go
please
on.
Continue. Yes. Hello, Prof. You were going to say
Right.
something.
I
Yes.
don't know if you want me to. So
No.
in terms of
Please.
in terms of fiscal support, there's no greater fiscal requirement benefit than to earn more money from more increased activity. Look at biofuel. Now, since 2006, NNPC has earmarked 1 million hectares to produce cassava and sugarcane for biofuel so that it could substitute our fossil fuel and give us a lot of revenue, save our forex. We spend 30% of what we are spending on that import figure I gave you is actually on petroleum import and subsidy. So that's that. And then apart from that, we will get more receipts and we have more. Do you know that the biggest item keeping inflation high in Nigeria is food basket index, which is around 13.8. Otherwise, the core index, everything has hit single-digit inflation. But it's the food. And when you are importing this food, you are passing through the high cost to the consumer, and that is inflationary. And that's why we're having all this high inflation, despite the fact that we are producing more food relatively. You could see more rice, and we are now more likely to export rice now. But the footprint is also shrinking. That is, our agroecological footprint is also shrinking because of conflict in the northeast, northwest, north central, conflict between the food, our food production systems and livestock and grain. So, but that notwithstanding, we are still producing more food. But the problems are the import, the smuggling of these goods are impacting on prices of food basket index. And so it keeps inflation high. We have to tackle this matter. There's no other way to run to. According to the predictions of the U.S. Energy Information Agency, the average price of crude this year will be $62 against $71 last year. We are going to have a lower net receipt from oil. And there's so much turbulence in the oil industry. We have to move in this direction for this country to survive, given our population growth figures.
Now, Professor Ken, before we went on a break, you were speaking about the food basket index and how its contribution of 13.8% to inflation is actually a huge problem. What should the federal government actually be doing to ensure that the prime lending rate is reduced so that we can see single digits actually coming out, so that people can actually afford certain loans and we can actually put something towards employability and encouraging people towards entrepreneurship?
Okay, well, that's actually an excellent question. Now, let's have a stab at it. The CBN, you could see that in the last monetary policy committee meeting and the one before, they reduced the monetary policy rate from 14% to 13.5%. Now, you would argue that that is not far enough, but at least it's a big signal that the CBN is concerned about growth and employment in the economy. But bear in mind that the interest rate and the inflation rate, there has to be a headroom. If you don't have a headroom, you discourage all the investors. Put yourself in the position. If you are investing in Nigeria from abroad in our portfolio investment and all those other investments, you expect to earn money. You are not going to invest if there's the prospect of a negative interest rate. A real interest rate is negative, which means that by the end of the year or in the next day, your money the inflation has swallowed up what you would have earned as interest. But that notwithstanding, what the CBN has done is to open a back door of cash reserve ratio based financing, which does three things. One is about 4 trillion, more than 4 trillion naira, which is held in the CBN from 22.5% of commercial bank deposits is in there. And they don't earn any interest from that. So what the CBN has said to them, please, if you are prepared to go to a medium-term lending framework of about 7 years with a moratorium and 9% interest, come here and take the money. 4 trillion naira. I mean, this makes, it makes the other ones very small, the 200 billion here, 300 billion. No, that is the bulk. And how many commercial banks are jumping up and down to access this money? It tells you that there's another agenda on the table. The commercial banks prefer to go and buy government treasury bills at 15, 17, 18%, and then do nothing and sit back. And this is armchair banking, and then sit back. Now you tell me, if they have their money 100% guaranteed on government security, yield on government security at 18%, 20%, then what if you come to borrow from them, they will give you from 25% on above. They can't give you below the rate at which what they are getting from government. And then you tell me, what is that doing to the economy? You are crowding our private sector investment. And then you are giving the money to the non-productive sector of our economy. And that should stop. That should stop. They should go and use the dormant money sitting in the bank to energize the base and build the base of the pyramid so that they themselves can make more money and not make fictitious money and then declare huge capital while your constituency or businesses are going bankrupt. It doesn't make sense.
Prof, the CBN Governor was in Lagos recently at an event organized by the Arise Media Group. And one of the issues that came up there was about the duty of the CBN to defend the Naira. There was also a story published by Bloomberg indicating that the CBN may somewhere down the line devalue the Naira. What's your take on this? Should we free float the Naira according to, in line with market forces of demand and supply? Or you think that the CBN saying it has no such plans is holding a good position, is justified?
Now, look, let me give you the background to this before you understand why I am going to say to you that the CBN has to manage our currency, at least for now. One, we do not have the luxury of enough forex revenue to deal with the demand. We have our major source, 70% of our resource is coming from oil, and the price is not determined by Nigeria. They are determined elsewhere, and you cannot bank on anything. You can go and put any benchmark you like. It doesn't mean anything to what is going on in Iran and what America. America has pushed their shale oil from 9 million barrels a day to 12 million barrels a day, completely undermining OPEC. We have no control. If this country is exporting a lot of non-oil products, if you devalue, everybody will be happy because you are now going to make our produce more attractive and cheaper to the international market and will sell more and bring more currency. We have not got the luxury of having enough currency to deal with the requests and demands that it needs to meet. So that's number one. Now, when you are on this and then somebody's telling you to float your currency, where is it going to go? The reason why we had vote of confidence from investors at the aftermath of this election and with the reappointment of the CBN governor is because we have maintained forex stability for nearly 2 years. The same, it doesn't even matter to the investor whether the Naira is exchanging at 500 Naira to $1 or 350 to $1. What matters to them is, are you going to keep it steady at that price? That is what they want, to be predictable so that when they invest their money and there's a headroom on the real interest rate, they make small money. But if they are not sure, they're not going to invest. So what they have done over the 2 years to maintain that stability at whatever 350, 360, whatever it is, they maintained it and investor confidence was restored. People now know that they can invest because they have confidence that the authorities will keep faith with this. And obviously, they tried again. It's not the best approach to have two currency or triple rates, but you could see that the CBN has been trying to liberalize that forex regime by introducing, for example, the importer-exporter investor window, the exporter-investor window, which has brought in nearly $50 billion in 2 years, augmenting our reserves. And so you can see that it's doing something. And on that window, there's a lot of activity in that window. So it will be gradually liberalizing, as well as manage the thing. It's not possible. You say, go ahead, you will not see the currency anymore, and it will be, it's unbelievable. The inflation you are going to bring to the country will be unacceptable.
Absolutely, sir. Now let's go back to our prime lending rates discussion for a second. What should the government be doing to actually promote entrepreneurship, aside from the prime lending rates, that can give us cheaper access to certain finance? What other policies can we look at so that we can actually encourage a certain level of employability that can sustain the nation?
Okay. I have mentioned the CRR-based lending, which effectively drops it to single digit. And then over a longer period of time. Because if you are manufacturing, you don't need 1 year loan. You need 3, 4, 5 years loan. Now, also, the CBN has intervened massively by augmenting the real sector fund and bringing more monies like Anchor Borrowers Program and all these other. And the Bankers Committee have also done 5% of their profit on SMEs, SMEIS. So all of those are happening. And right now, the CBN, as I can see, as all of us are seeing, is tackling head-on the presidential directive on those 10 items. And as I have mentioned to you, is end-to-end intervention. We haven't seen this kind of orchestration before in our agricultural platforms. So that is happening. So what that does is to create employment. And I noticed also something else. It's not money for the boys, for the big boys, as we have seen in the past. If you remember CAC, when it came in the past, it was targeted to people with cash flows of over 350 million naira and 300 million naira. This one is not only is a two-way lane. One is consulted with the people who are currently producing palm oil, for example, and say to them, come and take money, disburse 30 billion. But it's also heavily on the side of outgrower schemes, which involves and engages with our subsistence farmers and meet them at their point of need. So go with 1 hectare, we are with you there, and then we'll produce. And money is going in there. And it's not just money to come and borrow money and go. No, it is land clearing, land development, seedling from AIITA and the NIFO, and all the inputs in huge quantity fertilizers are now being blended in Nigeria. And then you go all the way to processing and to the market. So I'm telling you, what is happening is tsunami. That's what I have to tell you. It has massive implication for employment and also for capacity development, productive capacity development.
But Prof, I see that you are very enthusiastic, very optimistic about what the CBN is doing and about government policies. But are we not doing all of this so late in the day? And is it possible for us to have, at the same time, low interest rate, low inflation, a robust reserve system, that can generate growth?
Okay, let's go back again to your inflation. How can you tackle inflation more than concentrating on agriculture? If you disaggregate the inflation figure, you see rural index around 11, 10 point something. You see urban index. You see the food basket is 13.7, 13.8. There's a big distance between the core inflation was around 0.99
Professor Ife, apologies. Before we went on a break, you were speaking about the efforts of the Central Bank of Nigeria, especially over the last 2 years, and you stated that what is happening is tsunami. Please go on, sir.
Yeah, what I was saying is that, you addressed the issue of interest rates. Why is it not coming down? I gave you the reason. Efforts are being made to bring it down, but mindful of inflation. And then when we now disaggregated inflation figures to see the contributions of the inflation figure, the rural inflation figure around 10 plus, then you have urban inflation, you have core inflation on head. But the one that is the biggest palaver we have in the inflation basket is the food basket sub-index. Now that is 13.8. So when you normalize, it brings the figure to about 11.4. So if that was to come down, inflation goes down. Already it's hitting single digit. If you look at core inflation, excluding food basket, all other indices, excluding food basket, they're already single digit. So we've got to tackle food. We have to tackle food for so many reasons. Our growth rate on agriculture is below the population rate. Our population rate, GDP rate is lower than the population growth rate. Population growth rate is 3.2%. So how are you going to feed our population? There's something they call demographic time bomb. And I don't want to spend your little time going into that detail, but it will freeze you if you hear this story. But then what I'm saying is that the thing is that we have gone past ceremonial activities about food production and food revolution. That what we have now is end-to-end intervention in agriculture. And you're taking it by 10 items. The one that has happened is successful. You've seen the rice. Rice is very successful, bringing nearly 5 million metric tons, cutting down the import bill by 90% of rice, and then ready now to export rice by the end of this year. So you can see that reversal. So what we are doing is that backward integration is being given meaning. Diversification is being given meaning by massive intervention. But it is not enough to simply intervene. You also have to fight all the distortions in the market caused by importation of substandard goods and smuggling of goods. That, in fact, you think it's just rice that's smuggling. They're smuggling everything. So we are doing that, and both of them are against the law, they're against the WTO, they're against everything. And we shouldn't allow that. And what we are saying to the people, I was there when the CBN Governor was reading the Riot Act to all the people in the value chain and saying to them, enough is enough. I am giving you money and resources to make sure you go to farm and produce, to enable you to process, to give you money at single-digit rates to do what you need to do. We are backing you as never before. And please, let's do this business. We want to create jobs in this country. We want to increase the productive capacity. We want to diversify our revenue base. We want to earn money from export. And these are all the good reasons for what is being done. And I have not seen anywhere on all of this. I'm a trade expert. I haven't seen any violation of WTO rules. If anything, we should give infant protection. That is a fundamental requirement of WTO, infant protection. So we are not violating anything. We are not violating our CET obligations under ECOWAS. We are working within the ambit of that deal, but we can use instruments that we have, which is levy instrument, to augment the effective tax on those items, so that CBN is giving some support. And CBN is not doing anything extraordinary. It is within their secondary mandate to support sustainable economic development.
Prof, I'd like you to comment a little bit on something you said, well, you don't want to go into. Your reference to GDP growth rate. In his speech on June 12, the president said, well, we should be expecting about 2.7% growth rate in 2019. And I think, that's consistent with what the CBN has also said. But we have had guests on this program who have said, no, this is not ambitious enough. What's your take? What do you think?
Anyway, the jury is out. The economic recovery and growth plan projected 3%, in fact, up to 3.5% in some cases. And then I know that there's a shifting projection on all of this. And government is on one side, and then you have the World Bank and IMF on the lower end of 2.1, 2.2, and all that. The issue is this. The major constraint that we have on the growth of our GDP, the most important one from my perspective, is what we are doing in agriculture, in those 10 items. Because if you are not tackling that, you have the pass-through from high-cost imports. They are passing through to the consumer, and that is affecting the food price index. And then you've seen it. I've just explained to you the divergence in the inflation figures, that food is critical to that. And then when you orchestrate this action, as we are seeing right now, can you imagine 1.4 million hectares of land is programmed to be planted with a high-yield palm tree. Cassava is in millions of hectares. And you can see the impact. How many more millions of tons of food will be coming in with all this implementation? It will be more than 50 million metric tons of food. You're going to see millions of young people getting into employment. You're going to see increased tempo of economic activity. You're going to see export of both the biofuel and both the cassava flour and cassava starch. There are all sorts of produce that will be exported. Do you know that we can earn $4.3 billion from sesame seed alone? So the thing is this, we keep saying this. We keep talking about diversification, talking about all these wishful thinking for years, more than 40 years, and we haven't realized anything. But now we have a structure and policy balance and direct presidential weight and directive on this, and a committed bank that really wants to see this happen and flexing every possible muscle that it has to ensure that this thing is going to hit the ground running. And I'm telling you, I have seen this thing for years, and I can tell you that it's going to happen.
Well, sir, the president seemed quite positive about our GDP growth rates when he was giving the speech that Dr. Abazi mentioned on June 12th. Yet, as you mentioned, of course, this is still a very low GDP growth rate. And to be very honest, with a GDP growth rate that is below both our population and inflation rates, really and truly, we are still growing at a deficit. So just now, you mentioned structure and policy, and you seem quite positive. So let's touch on the macroeconomic policies. What macroeconomic policies can the government implement at this time? If we can give three per se, two to actually contribute to that growth, especially if we are trying to achieve something with the ERGP by 2020, which also is arguably not conducive enough?
Okay. Now, what we have missed, we have had so many supply-based actions, but what we have now missed, which is brought in by Presidential Order 3, is demand-based action. Because when the government is going to stimulate demand by saying to the federal authorities like Bureau for Public Procurement and state governments and all these governments are saying, consume Nigerian-made goods. Now, man has given a list of all their registered produce and products in Nigeria to BPP and government, and they've also registered companies and manufacturers, their list. Now, what happens in procurement is that we have a premium for local content because the law allows up to 10%, I think thereabout, of if price in competitive situations, if made in Nigeria or locally, local thing, you can get up to 10% higher than the benchmark price. So that is very important. So now you look at people like Innocent, the people that are assembling cars here. If government begins to procure their cars, it's a huge incentive. But let me tell you something. If you are going to go on a drive to China and Korea and all these people and tell them, come and set up in Nigeria, they need to hear the second message, that government is committed to procuring what is going to be produced. They will be jumping the ship immediately. They will be coming in here because they know that those 40% that they are allowed to sell in Nigeria will already be consumed by government directive, that there's government support, policy support behind this. They will be on their way. But if you go with only supply-based action, you know, your guess is as good as mine, that we will have to see what happens. So that's very important. Now, in terms of other policyholders keying in, I have to tell you that one of the best documents I have seen in our country, you know, we are very good in creating good documents, excellent documents, but the devil is in the implementation of those. Now, we have good economic recovery and growth plan, which was a precondition for development partners to intervene in 2017 and 16. So February 2017, we had a good document, and that encouraged them to begin to come in. Now, we need to make sure that everybody's playing their role within the document. And now that CBN, for example, has gone into compliance, everybody's screaming because it's gone into compliance. Nigerians are so good to having their way. And now they're going into compliance. Now people are screaming. So the thing is, I have told you the things that the Minister of Finance is supposed to do in the context of what you have just asked me, which is how do we deal with these 10 products? The Minister of Finance should now go to ECOWAS and say to them, look, I'm aware of our CET. I'm not going to touch the CET, but we have strong concerns on these 10 items or 41 items. And so we are going to bring in levy instruments to augment so that we discourage that. And that is a big sign to those who are importing this. Look, the duty has gone up, or effective duty has gone up. Then in the case of the WTO, the trade minister should be going to WTO to say there are violations. There are certain items that are causing problems for our fiscal policy and monetary policy. We are losing money because they are smuggling these goods. We have this, you know, all those. You are not banning. I haven't heard the word I have banned. That's where it becomes a restrictive trade practice. But you are going to restrict. And then you are doing it within the ambit of the WTO rules. But you have to now tell WTO what you are doing, that you have already consulted the value chain, you have already identified public interest. Of course, it is public interest when our revenue is being taken by all these imports. So now you are now going to use this to say to them, I want to start talking officially to China and Indonesia and Malaysia, who are culprits in this direction, and calm them down the table. And this is what this man has done. Trump has done. Trump invoked his rights under the Article 301 of their trade law in U.S., and then embarked on safeguard action and inflicted duty. The law permits it. Not only that our own law permits safeguard action, even the treaty, even the WTO rules allow safeguard action. ECOWAS one allows safeguard action, where you have to take action to protect your economy. You are protecting your economy from injurious substances that are being dumped here. Mind you, these countries are subsidizing their products to enter into the Nigerian market. It's not even a fair competition. Apart from the substandard ones, they are actually deliberately subsidizing these goods to enter here, to undermine our productive capacity. undermine our capacity to produce and feed ourselves. So we have to fight, and they will do it within the law.
Prof, before we go, I mean, I've heard you repeatedly referring to WTO rules. We became the 107th member of WTO when we signed up to Article 4. But there are some Nigerians who believe that, look, our membership of the WTO is a disadvantage. What do you think? Briefly.
No, it cannot be. The purpose of WTO is one, to have, you know, the world was characterized by all sorts of trade wars and all that. And in that case, you lose business. There's less employment, less production when you have trade wars. As you have seen now with America and China, you've seen that production volumes are going down. All the production indices are showing negative now. So what WTO is a rules-based organization and membership. Yeah. So everybody joins as members, and there are rules guarding the thing. So the intention is this. When you implement WTO trade facilitation agreement, you are going to save 10 to 15% of import and export volumes figure. For example, Nigerian import and export is about $100 billion. We are going to save about $15 billion by simply implementing the WTO trade facilitation agreement. Now, what that also means is that when you minimize, the overall objective of WTO is for you to remove duties and liberalize trade. That's fine. But you have to be strong enough and capable of competing for you to do that. So that's why they allow infant industry protection. Now, nobody argues with you in the WTO about infant industry protection because they know you cannot invest money in bringing in a new industry where you can justify the need. You make so many inventions and you want to put it out there, and then they'll say you can't have protection.
Well,
so it's done and agreed.
Well,
but
Prof,
Nigeria is not doing anything about it. We're not recognizing that.
Well, Prof, thank you very much. It's been very exciting having this conversation with you this moment.
Thank you.
I'm sure that other people listening to you will have their own ideas. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Prof.